Doctor urged Millionaire to leave his pregnant wife after the scan. What he did shocked everyone. The ultrasound screen flickered in the dimly lit room as Dr. Harrison's face drained of color. His hand trembled slightly as he moved the probe across Sarah Mitchell's swollen belly, his expression growing more grave with each passing second. James Mitchell, one of the city's most successful real estate developers, gripped his wife's hand tighter, feeling her pulse quicken beneath his fingers. "Doctor, what's wrong?" Sarah's voice was barely a whisper, her free hand instinctively moving to protect her unborn child. Before we continue this incredible story of love, choice, and the true meaning of family, I want to know where you're watching from today. Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in the power of unconditional love, please hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and ring the notification bell so you never miss our stories of hope and humanity. Dr. Harrison set down the probe and turned to face them, his 30 years of medical experience failing to mask his shock. "Mr. Mitchell, Mrs. Mitchell, I need to show you something." He pointed to the screen where the grainy black and white image revealed what should have been impossible. "Your baby. There are severe abnormalities. The spine, the brain development. I've never seen anything quite like this." James felt the world tilt. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying," Dr. Harrison chose his words carefully, "that this child, if it survives birth, will face challenges that—" "Mr. Mitchell, may I speak with you privately?" "No," Sarah said firmly, her voice stronger now. "Whatever you have to say, you say it to both of us." The doctor nodded slowly. "Very well. The scan shows multiple severe disabilities. This child will never walk, likely never speak, and will require round-the-clock care for whatever life they have. The financial burden alone," he looked directly at James. "You're a successful man, Mr. Mitchell. You have a reputation, a business to run. I'm advising you to consider alternative options." "Alternative options." James's voice was dangerously quiet. "Leave," Dr. Harrison said bluntly. "Start over. You're young, wealthy, you can have other children with someone else. No one would blame you for walking away from this situation." The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah's tears fell silently onto the examination table, while James stood frozen, his mind racing. What happened next would shock not just Dr. Harrison, but the entire city. James Mitchell had built his empire from nothing. At 35, he owned half the commercial real estate in the city, drove cars worth more than most people's houses, and lived in a penthouse that overlooked the skyline he'd helped shape. But standing in that sterile medical office, watching his wife's heart break in real time, none of that mattered. "Get out," James said quietly. Dr. Harrison blinked. "I'm sorry." "I said get out. Find us another doctor, one who sees babies as human beings, not inconveniences to be discarded." "Mr. Mitchell, I'm trying to be realistic." "You're trying to be cruel," James's voice rose. "You just told me to abandon my wife and child because they don't fit your definition of perfect. Get out before I have security escort you out." Dr. Harrison gathered his papers, shaking his head. "You're making a mistake. Think about your future, your business." "I am thinking about my future," James said, moving to stand beside Sarah, wrapping his arm around her shaking shoulders. "And my future is right here, with my wife and our child. Every single day they have." After the doctor left, James held Sarah as she sobbed, her whole body trembling with the weight of the diagnosis. "He's wrong," she whispered. "He has to be wrong. I can feel our baby moving, James. I can feel life." "Then that's all that matters," James said, though his own heart was racing with fear. "We'll get second opinions, third opinions. We'll find the best specialists in the world." "And if they all say the same thing?" James pulled back to look into her eyes, the same green eyes that had captured him 5 years ago at a charity gala where she'd been volunteering, not attending as a guest like everyone else in his circle. "Then we love our child exactly as they are. Your business is just business. You and this baby are my life." But even as he said the words, James knew the challenges ahead would test everything he believed about himself, about love, and about what truly mattered in life. The next weeks were a whirlwind of medical appointments. They saw specialist after specialist, each confirming Dr. Harrison's diagnosis with varying degrees of sympathy. The baby, a girl they learned, had a rare combination of conditions that would indeed leave her severely disabled. "Most couples in your situation choose to terminate," one doctor said gently. "It's not too late." "It's too late the moment you suggest ending my daughter's life," Sarah interrupted. "We're not most couples." James watched his wife transform during those weeks. The gentle, quiet woman who'd preferred organizing charity events to attending them became a fierce advocate for their unborn child. She researched every condition, every possible treatment, every story of hope she could find. But the pressure from outside was immense. Word had leaked. It always did in their social circles, and suddenly everyone had an opinion. "James, be reasonable," his business partner Richard said over lunch at their usual club. "You have responsibilities, shareholders, employees. How can you run a company while caring for a severely disabled child?" "The same way I always have," James replied, "by prioritizing what matters. And if clients start walking away? If they see you as distracted, unreliable? Then they weren't clients worth having." Richard leaned back, studying him. "You've changed. This isn't the James Mitchell who built an empire by making tough decisions." "You're right," James said. "That James Mitchell was building an empire for its own sake. This one knows what he's building it for." The conversation he dreaded most came that evening, a call from his mother who lived in Paris and measured love in stock portfolios and social standing. "Darling, I heard the most disturbing news," she began without preamble. "Surely it's not true." "If you heard that Sarah and I are having a baby who will face some challenges, then yes, it's true." "Challenges?" His mother's laugh was bitter. "James, don't be naive. This will ruin you, your reputation, your business, your entire life. And for what? A child who will never even know you?" "She'll know me," James said firmly. "She'll know that her father loved her from the moment he learned she existed. She'll know that she was wanted, cherished, fought for. You're being emotional. This isn't like you." "No, Mother. This is exactly like me. You just never bothered to know me beyond my bank statements." He hung up on her protests, something he'd never done before. Sarah was watching from the doorway, her hand on her growing belly. "Your mother's not wrong about the business impact," she said softly. "I've seen the emails you've been trying to hide from me. 3 clients have already pulled out." James crossed to her, placing his hand over hers on her belly. "Let them go. Money can be remade. Moments can't." "When did you become so wise?" Sarah asked, leaning into him. "The moment Dr. Harrison told me to leave. I realized I had a choice. Be the man everyone expected me to be, or be the man you and our daughter need me to be." He felt a flutter beneath their joined hands. Their daughter, moving. "She's strong, Sarah, like her mother." "Like her father," Sarah corrected. "The man who chose love over logic." But logic had its place, and James knew they needed to prepare. He threw himself into research with the same intensity he'd once reserved for property deals. He learned about adaptive equipment, specialized therapies, support networks. He interviewed caregivers, researched schools, planned for a future that looked nothing like what he'd imagined, but was no less precious for its differences. One evening, he found Sarah in what would be the nursery, painting a mural on the wall. A garden full of flowers reaching toward the sun. "It's beautiful," he said. "I want her to see beauty everywhere, even if—" Sarah's voice caught. "Even if she sees it differently than we do." "She will see beauty," James said firmly, "because she'll be surrounded by love." Sarah turned to him, paint smudged on her cheek. "Do you ever wonder if we're being selfish? Bringing a child into the world who will struggle so much?" It was the question that haunted them both in the quiet hours. James had wondered, had doubted, had lain awake imagining the challenges their daughter would face. But he'd also imagined her laughter, her spirit, the ways she'd change their world simply by being in it. "I think," he said slowly, "that deciding who deserves life based on their challenges is the ultimate selfishness. Our daughter has as much right to exist, to be loved, to experience whatever joy she can find, as anyone else. The world won't be kind to her. Then we'll teach the world to be kinder. As Sarah's due date approached, the pressure intensified. Business associates distanced themselves. Social invitations dried up. Even some of their friends found excuses to avoid them, as if disability were contagious. But unexpected support came too. James's assistant, Maria, whose own son had Down syndrome, became a fierce ally. "People told me to institutionalize Miguel," she said. "Now he's 22, works at a bakery, and brings more joy to this world than most people I know. Don't let anyone tell you your daughter's life has less value." The janitor in their building, Mr. Chen, stopped James one evening. "My granddaughter, she has cerebral palsy. Doctors said she'd never do anything. Last week she graduated high school. She types with one finger, takes her an hour to write a paragraph, but she wrote a speech that made everyone cry. Miracles come in all forms, Mr. Mitchell." These stories sustained them through the dark moments, through the nights when fear threatened to overwhelm love. James started a journal for their daughter, writing letters she might never be able to read, but that contained all the things he wanted her to know. "Dear little one," he wrote one night while Sarah slept beside him, "tomorrow you'll be born and I'm terrified. Not of you, never of you, but of whether I'll be enough, whether I can be the father you deserve. But I promise you this, I will try every single day. I will celebrate every breath you take, every movement you make, every moment you're with us. You are not a mistake or a burden or a tragedy. You are our daughter, and you are perfect, exactly as you are." The next morning, Sarah went into labor. It was a difficult delivery, complicated by the baby's conditions. James held Sarah's hand through 18 hours of labor, whispering encouragement, being her strength when hers faltered. "I can't," Sarah gasped at one point. "I can't do this." "Yes, you can," James said firmly. "You're the strongest person I know. Our daughter needs you to be strong just a little longer." And then, at 3:47 a.m. on a rainy Tuesday morning, Emma Grace Mitchell entered the world. She didn't cry. Couldn't cry, the doctors explained quickly, due to her conditions. But she was alive, her tiny chest rising and falling, her perfect fingers curled into fists. "Can I hold her?" Sarah asked, exhausted but radiant. The nurses exchanged glances. "She's very fragile." "She's my daughter," Sarah said firmly. "Please." They placed Emma carefully on Sarah's chest, connected to what seemed like a dozen machines. She was tiny, clearly different, clearly facing challenges that would define her life. But she was theirs. "Hello, beautiful girl," Sarah whispered. "We've been waiting for you." James touched Emma's hand, and her fingers curled around his. The grip was weak, but it was there. His daughter was holding his hand. "She knows us," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Of course she does," Sarah said. "We're her parents." The NICU became their second home. Emma needed multiple surgeries in her first weeks, each one a risk, each one necessary. James learned to navigate the maze of machines keeping his daughter alive, learned what each beep and alarm meant, learned to find hope in the smallest improvements. He conducted business from the hospital, taking calls between Emma's procedures, closing deals while watching her sleep. His presence there, day after day, began to shift something in how people saw him. "I heard Mitchell hasn't left the hospital in 2 weeks, one competitor said to another, not knowing James could hear them in the hallway. "Still running his empire from his kid's bedside." "Respect," the other replied. "That's a different kind of strength." And it was. James discovered reserves of strength he'd never known existed. Strength to smile when doctors delivered bad news. Strength to sing to Emma when she was in pain. Strength to believe in tomorrow when today was almost unbearable. Sarah matched him moment for moment. She learned Emma's cues, could tell when their daughter was comfortable or distressed despite her inability to cry. She became an expert in Emma's conditions, challenging doctors, advocating fiercely, never accepting can't as an answer. She smiled, Sarah said one day, 3 months into their NICU stay. "Look, James, she's smiling." The doctors said it was likely involuntary, a reflex, but James saw what Sarah saw, their daughter, despite everything, finding a moment of joy. "That's our girl," he whispered, "finding light in the darkness." Emma came home after 4 months, accompanied by a team of nurses and enough medical equipment to fill a room. Their penthouse, once a showplace for James's success, transformed into a specialized care facility. The modern art was replaced with adaptive equipment. The spare bedrooms became storage for medical supplies and space for round-the-clock nurses. "It looks like a hospital," Richard said when he finally visited, his discomfort obvious. "It looks like a home where a child with medical needs lives," James corrected. "If that bothers you, you know where the door is." But Richard surprised him by sitting down, really looking at Emma for the first time. "She has your eyes," he said finally. "I can see you in her." "Really?" "The determination. Look at her fighting. That's all you, James." It was the beginning of a shift. As people saw James and Sarah's dedication, their unwavering love for Emma, opinions began to change. The story of the millionaire who chose his disabled daughter over easy options spread, but not as gossip, as inspiration. James used his platform to advocate for disability rights, for better medical care, for inclusion. He spoke at conferences not about real estate, but about the value of every life. His business, rather than suffering, evolved. He began developing accessible housing, hiring people with disabilities, using his resources to create change. "You've lost $3 million this quarter on these accessibility projects," his CFO reported. "Have I?" James asked, watching Emma work with her physical therapist, trying so hard to move her hand just an inch. "Or have I invested $3 million in building a world where my daughter can exist with dignity?" Emma's first year was a symphony of small miracles and devastating setbacks. She developed pneumonia twice, each time fighting back with a tenacity that amazed her doctors. She couldn't speak, but she learned to communicate with eye movements, with the tiniest gestures that Sarah and James became expert at reading. "She said, 'I love you today,'" Sarah announced one evening. The nurse looked skeptical. "How?" Sarah demonstrated the series of blinks and hand movements Emma had made. "See, I love you." "That's just random movement." "That's our daughter talking to us," James interrupted, "and we're listening." They celebrated every milestone, no matter how small. The first time Emma tracked movement with her eyes, the first time she gripped a specially designed toy, the first time she made it through a night without distress. Each moment was a victory, each day a gift. But the hardest moments came in the quiet hours, when they watched other children Emma's age reaching milestones she never would. At a park one day, Sarah broke down watching toddlers run and play. "She'll never do that," she sobbed into James's shoulder. "She'll never run or jump or—" "No," James said gently. "She won't. But she'll do other things. She'll teach us patience. She'll show us strength. She'll prove that value isn't measured in what you can do, but in who you are." "How are you so strong?" "I'm not," James admitted. "I break down in my office bathroom at least once a week. But then I think about Emma, how hard she fights just to be here, and I figure the least I can do is match her courage." They found their tribe slowly. Other parents of children with disabilities, therapists who saw potential where others saw limitations, friends who learned to see Emma, not just her conditions. Their penthouse became a gathering place for families who understood that love wasn't about perfection, but about showing up day after day, especially when it was hard. Emma's second birthday was a celebration of survival. She'd defied every odd, exceeded every prediction. She couldn't eat cake, but she watched with bright eyes as they sang to her, her hand moving in what Sarah swore was an attempt to clap. "2 years ago, a doctor told me to leave," James said, addressing the small gathering of family and medical staff who'd become family. "He said Emma would be a burden, that she'd ruin my life." He looked at his daughter, propped in her specialized chair, surrounded by people who loved her. He was wrong about everything except one thing. She did ruin my life. My old life. The one where I measured success in dollars and deals. She ruined that life and gave me a better one, where success means seeing her smile, where wealth is counted in moments, not money. Dr. Harrison had been wrong, but not in the way James expected. Yes, Emma faced every challenge he'd predicted and more. But what he'd failed to predict was the joy, the way her eyes lit up when she heard her favorite song, the way she calmed instantly when Sarah hummed to her, the way she fought to participate in the world despite every obstacle. "She's teaching me to slow down," James told a reporter who'd come to do a story on accessible housing. "In business, I was always rushing to the next deal. Emma operates on her own timeline. She's taught me that the present moment is all we really have." The article, when it came out, sparked something unexpected. Parents from around the country began reaching out, sharing their own stories, seeking advice. James found himself at the center of an accidental movement. Successful people who chose family over conventional wisdom, who refused to see disability as tragedy. One letter particularly moved him. "My wife is pregnant with a child who has similar conditions to your Emma," a young father wrote. "Our doctor gave us the same advice yours did. We were going to take it until we read about you. Thank you for showing us another way." James wrote back immediately, sharing resources, offering support, remembering his own terror and isolation in those early days. It became a regular part of his routine, mentoring other families, proving that choosing love over fear was not just possible, but powerful. Emma's third year brought new challenges. She needed spinal surgery, a risky procedure that would either improve her mobility slightly or could leave her in worse condition. James and Sarah agonized over the decision. "What if we make the wrong choice?" Sarah asked, watching Emma sleep the night before the surgery. "There is no wrong choice," James realized. "There's only doing our best with the information we have out of love for her." The surgery was successful, marginally. Emma gained tiny improvements that seemed insignificant to outsiders, but were monumental to her family. She could hold her head up for longer periods. She could move her fingers with more control, small victories that they celebrated like Olympic medals. It was during Emma's recovery that James made a decision that shocked everyone. He stepped back from day-to-day operations of his company, appointing Richard as CEO, while he took a chairman role. "You're giving up control?" Richard asked, stunned. "I'm taking control," James corrected. "Of what matters? I'll still guide the company, but Emma needs me more than another merger does." "The board will revolt." "Let them. I've made them millions. Now I'm going to make something more important. Memories with my daughter." The board did protest until James presented his vision, transforming their real estate empire into a leader in accessible development. Not just wheelchair ramps and wider doors, but truly inclusive communities where people of all abilities could thrive. "It's a niche market," one board member argued. "It's an underserved market," James countered. 1 in 4 people will experience disability in their lifetime. We're not building for a niche, we're building for humanity. The pivot was challenging but successful. James's personal story, combined with innovative designs, attracted attention from municipalities wanting inclusive development. What started as a father's desire to build a better world for his daughter became a business model that others rushed to copy. But the real changes were at home. With more time, James discovered layers to Emma's personality that rushed visits had missed. She was funny, finding ways to express humor through her limited movements. She was stubborn, refusing therapy some days, with a determination that made him proud even as it frustrated her caregivers. She was loving, always calmer when her parents were near, always trying to reach for them despite her limitations. "She's spelling," Sarah shouted one afternoon when Emma was 4. "Look." Using a communication board with letters, painstakingly moving her hand with assistance, Emma had spelled out, "Mama." "That's right, baby girl," Sarah cried, tears streaming. "I'm Mama." It took Emma 20 minutes to spell Dada next, but James waited patiently, encouraging every movement. When she finished, he was crying too. "We're going to need a better communication system," he said, already researching options. "Our girl has things to say." They found an eye-gaze computer system that allowed Emma to select letters by looking at them. It was slow, exhausting work for her, but Emma persevered. Her first full sentence, at age 5, took an hour to compose. "I love my family." "We love you too, Princess," James whispered, saving the sentence, printing it, framing it. It hung in his office next to his business awards, worth more than all of them combined. Emma started school at 6, attending a specialized program that focused on children with severe disabilities. James and Sarah were terrified. Would she be okay without them? Would others see her worth? They needn't have worried. Emma's teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, was a former pediatric nurse who'd transitioned to special education. She saw Emma's potential immediately. "She's bright," Mrs. Rodriguez reported after the first week. "She understands everything. We just need to find more ways to let her show it." Emma thrived in school, making friends who, like her, communicated in unique ways. She particularly bonded with a boy named Tyler, who had cerebral palsy. They developed their own communication system, a series of looks and sounds that made perfect sense to them if no one else. "She has a best friend," Sarah marveled, watching Emma and Tyler talk during a school event. "Of course she does," James said. "Our girl knows how to connect with people. She gets that from you." "The determination to make it work despite obstacles, that's all you," Sarah countered. As Emma grew, so did her impact. James established the Emma Grace Foundation, funding research into her rare conditions, providing equipment for families who couldn't afford it, creating respite programs for exhausted caregivers. What had started as one family's journey became a lifeline for hundreds of others. The foundation's first gala was held on Emma's 7th birthday. The who's who of the business world attended, but the guests of honor were families like theirs, parents who'd chosen love over fear, children who defied every odd. 7 years ago, James addressed the crowd, "A doctor told me my daughter would ruin my life. In a way, he was right. Emma ruined my shallow life and gave me a profound one. She ruined my narrow definition of success and taught me that success is showing up, especially when it's hard. She ruined my belief that worth comes from ability and showed me that worth comes from being." He paused, looking at Emma in her custom gown, her eyes bright with understanding. "My daughter can't walk or talk in conventional ways. She'll never run a business or climb a mountain. But she's climbed mountains of her own, conquered challenges that would break most of us. She's taught hundreds of people that different doesn't mean less. She's changed laws, inspired buildings, created communities. Not bad for someone who was supposed to be a burden." The crowd erupted in applause, but James only had eyes for Emma, who was looking at him with such love it took his breath away. Using her communication device, she'd prepared something for the event. The words appeared on screens around the room. "Thank you, Daddy, for choosing me. I choose you too." There wasn't a dry eye in the room. Richard, now a regular visitor and Emma's unofficial uncle, stood up, raising his glass. "To Emma Grace Mitchell, who teaches us daily that the only disability in life is a bad attitude." "To Emma," the room echoed. Later that night, after the gala, the three of them sat in Emma's room. It looked like any 7-year-old's room, if you ignored the medical equipment, pink walls, stuffed animals, books everywhere because Emma loved being read to. "Did you have fun at your party?" Sarah asked. Emma's eyes moved to yes on her communication board, then spelled out, "Pretty dress." "The prettiest," James agreed. "Just like you." Emma smiled, a real smile, not a reflex, and began spelling again. It took time, but they waited patiently. They'd learned that all the best things required patience. "When I grow up, I want to help people like you help me." Sarah and James exchanged looks over Emma's head, both fighting tears. "You already do help people, sweetheart," Sarah said. "Every day, just by being you." "Really?" "Really," James confirmed. "You've helped more people than you know. Including Daddy. Especially Daddy." Emma's eyes moved between them, then back to her board. "Tell me the story." It was her favorite, the story of how they chose each other. James settled in, as he had hundreds of times before. Once upon a time, there was a daddy who thought he knew everything about success. As he told the story, watching Emma's face light up at her favorite parts, James thought about the man he'd been in that doctor's office 7 years ago. Scared, certainly, facing the unknown, but also standing at a crossroads between who he'd been and who he could become. He'd chosen love, chosen difficulty, chosen a path that no one would call easy. and in doing so, he'd discovered that the hardest choices often led to the greatest rewards. Emma fell asleep before the story ended, as she usually did. James and Sarah sat quietly, watching her breathe, still marveling that she was here. "Do you ever think about what life would have been like?" Sarah asked. "If we'd listened to Dr. Harrison?" "Empty," James said without hesitation. "Successful, maybe, in the way I used to measure success. But empty. Emma filled spaces in my heart I didn't even know were hollow." "She's going to face so much," Sarah said, the worry that never fully left creeping back in. "When we're gone, she'll be surrounded by the community we've built. The foundation will provide for her. But more than that, she'll have the knowledge that she was chosen, fought for, celebrated every single day of her life." James took Sarah's hand. "That's more than most people get." They sat in comfortable silence, hands linked, watching their daughter sleep. 7 years ago, they'd been told she would be a burden, a mistake, a regret. Instead, she'd been a teacher, a joy, a gift that kept giving. The next morning brought its usual challenges. Emma had a seizure during breakfast, not uncommon, but always terrifying. She struggled through physical therapy, frustrated by her body's limitations. She cried, her version of crying, silent but heartbreaking, when she couldn't make her hands do what she wanted. But she also laughed when James made silly faces. She focused intently on her teacher's lessons, absorbing everything. She spelled out, "I love you" to both parents before school, a daily ritual that never got old. "Same time tomorrow?" the bus aide asked as they loaded Emma's wheelchair. "Same time every day," James confirmed. "Wouldn't miss it." As the bus pulled away, Sarah leaned into him. "She's getting stronger." "She is. The doctors are amazed." "I meant emotionally. She's developing such a strong sense of self despite everything." "Because of everything," James corrected. "Our girl knows exactly who she is, because she's had to fight for every bit of it." His phone buzzed, a message from a father in Japan whose daughter had just been diagnosed with similar conditions. James had become a global resource for families facing the unthinkable. He forwarded the message to his foundation team, making a note to call the man personally later. He remembered the isolation of those early days too well to let another parent face them alone. "You've built something amazing," Sarah said, reading over his shoulder. "We've built it. None of this happens without you." "I meant what you've built inside yourself. The man who was terrified in that doctor's office is still terrified," James admitted, "every day, but Emma's courage makes mine look like nothing. If she can face the world with such grace, the least I can do is try to make that world worthy of her." That afternoon, James had a meeting that would have seemed impossible 7 years ago. Dr. Harrison sat across from him in the foundation offices, looking older, humbled. "Thank you for seeing me," the doctor began. "You said you had something important to discuss." "I did. I do." Dr. Harrison pulled out a check. "I want to donate to the foundation, and more than that, I want to apologize." James waited. "I've been following Emma's story. What you and your wife have accomplished, the lives you've changed." The doctor's voice cracked. "I was wrong. So terribly wrong. I let statistics and probabilities blind me to humanity. I told you to leave because I couldn't see past the challenges to the child." "You saw disability as tragedy," James said evenly. "I did. My own brother was disabled, polio, before the vaccine. I watched my parents struggle, saw how it limited their lives. I thought I was saving you from that." He met James's eyes. "Instead, I nearly robbed you of one of life's greatest gifts. I'm deeply sorry." James considered the man who'd almost changed everything with his cruel advice. "Your apology is accepted, but I have a condition for taking your donation." "Anything. Volunteer. 1 day a month at our respite center. Meet the families, see the children. Learn what you missed by looking only at limitations." "Yes, of course." "And Dr. Harrison, the next time a parent sits in your office facing an impossible diagnosis, remember Emma. Remember that every child deserves a chance to prove the statistics wrong." After the doctor left, James sat quietly in his office, surrounded by photos of Emma at every stage, the tiny baby covered in tubes, the toddler working so hard in therapy, the little girl spelling out her first words, the 7-year-old who'd stood with support at her birthday gala, defying every prediction. His phone rang, Sarah, calling from Emma's school. "You need to come, now." James's heart stopped. Is she okay? She's more than okay. Just come. He broke every speed limit getting there, bursting into the classroom to find a crowd gathered around Emma. She was in her stander, a device that allowed her to bear weight on her legs with support. But something was different. "Show Daddy," Mrs. Rodriguez encouraged. With enormous effort, Emma shifted her weight and moved 1 foot forward. Just an inch, maybe 2. But it was a step. Their daughter, who would never walk, had just taken a step. "Did you see?" Sarah was crying, laughing, filming all at once. "She's been working on it for weeks in secret. She wanted to surprise you." James knelt in front of Emma, his own eyes wet. "You amazing, incredible, miraculous girl. You took a step." Emma's eyes sparkled with pride as she spelled out, "Just like you taught me, 1 step at a time." It would take her 30 minutes to move 3 feet. She might never manage more than these tiny, supported movements. But she was walking in her own way, on her own terms, proving once again that never was just a word, not a verdict. That night, they celebrated with ice cream, pureed for Emma, dance music, Emma loved the vibrations, and a family movie night. It was ordinary and extraordinary, like every day with Emma. "I've been thinking," Sarah said as they got ready for bed, "about having another child." James froze. They'd discussed it over the years, but the fear of facing another diagnosis, the worry about having less time for Emma, had always stopped them. "What changed your mind?" "Emma did. Watching her today, seeing how she thrives with her classmates. She'd be an amazing big sister, and we have so much more love to give. The risks are there, but we've learned that risk and reward often go hand in hand." Sarah took his hands. "I'm not saying we should, I'm saying we should think about it." James pulled her close, thinking about their journey, the terror of that first diagnosis, the challenges they'd faced, but also the joy, the growth, the love that had multiplied rather than divided. "Let's think about it," he agreed. "Talk to doctors, understand our options, make an informed choice. Like we did with Emma. We didn't have a choice with Emma. She was already here, already ours." "We had a choice," Sarah reminded him. "Dr. Harrison gave us a choice, and we chose her. We choose her every day." "Best choice we ever made," James said, meaning it with every fiber of his being. A year later, they welcomed Emma's brother, Thomas, healthy, typical, born into a family that knew how to celebrate every milestone, while understanding that normal was just a setting on a washing machine. Emma adored him immediately, working harder than ever on her communication device to talk to her baby brother. Thomas, for his part, seemed to understand his sister's unique language from the start, babbling back at her in ways that made her light up. "He doesn't see her differences," Sarah marveled, watching 6-month-old Thomas reach for Emma's hand during tummy time. "Why would he?" James replied. "To him, she's just his sister, the one who makes funny faces and tells him stories through her computer." Emma had prepared for months to be a big sister, working with her therapists on ways she could interact with a baby. She'd learned to activate special toys with switches, could read stories using her device, and had even figured out how to gently rock Thomas's bouncer with her one mobile foot. "Baby sleeping," Emma spelled out one afternoon, watching Thomas nap. "I helped." "You did help," Sarah confirmed. "You sang him your special song." Emma's singing was a series of vocalizations that didn't form words but had rhythm and melody. Thomas seemed to find it soothing, often calming when he heard his sister's voice. The dynamics of their family shifted beautifully. Where they'd once worried that a typical child might feel neglected due to Emma's needs, they found instead that Thomas benefited from the patience and intentionality Emma had taught them. Every smile was celebrated, every milestone was appreciated, nothing was taken for granted. "He's trying to crawl toward Emma," James observed one evening, watching Thomas Army crawl across the therapy mat. Of course he is. She's his favorite person. Sarah smiled as Emma encouraged her brother with her vocalizations. Look at her face. She's so proud of him. Good job, Tommy, Emma spelled out. You can do it. At 2, Thomas's first clear word wasn't mama or dada. It was Emma, though it came out more like mema. His second was love, directed at his sister during one of their daily cuddle sessions. Your children are remarkable, Dr. Harrison said during one of his volunteer shifts. He'd become a regular at the center, transformed by his interactions with the families. The way Thomas sees Emma, he treats her like a sister, James said simply, because that's what she is. Many siblings of disabled children struggle with resentment, feeling overlooked. Thomas will probably face some of that as he grows, James acknowledged. But we're laying a foundation now. He sees that Emma's needs don't diminish his importance. Different needs equal love. It wasn't always easy. There were days when Thomas needed attention just as Emma was having a medical crisis. Times when they had to miss Thomas's activities for Emma's appointments. Moments when the weight of managing it all felt crushing. But there were also moments of pure magic. Like the day 4-year-old Thomas figured out how to help Emma use her communication device more easily, creating shortcuts she hadn't thought of. Or when he started translating Emma's vocalizations for strangers, proud to be the expert on his sister's language. Emma says she likes your dog, Thomas informed a confused woman at the park after Emma had made a series of sounds. She wishes she could pet him, but her hands don't work good. Can you bring him closer? The woman, initially uncomfortable with Emma's differences, melted at Thomas's matter-of-fact explanation. She brought the gentle golden retriever close, letting him rest his head on Emma's lap while she vocalized her joy. Your children are beautiful, the woman said to Sarah, tears in her eyes. Both of them. Inside and out, Sarah agreed, watching Thomas carefully guide Emma's hand to touch the dog's soft fur. The foundation grew alongside their family. What had started as one father's mission to build a better world for his daughter became a movement. The Emma Grace Centers now operated in 12 cities, providing therapy, respite care, and community for families like theirs. James spoke at medical schools, sharing their story with future doctors. When you deliver a diagnosis, he'd tell them, you're not just sharing medical facts. You're shaping how a family sees their future. Choose your words carefully. Lead with humanity, not statistics. One speaking engagement particularly stood out. A young medical student approached him afterward, crying. My professor is Dr. Harrison, she said. He told us about your family, about what he said to you. He uses it as an example of how not to counsel families. He says meeting Emma changed his entire approach to medicine. People can grow, James said. We all can. Emma teaches that daily. At 10, Emma was a force of nature. Limited physically but unlimited in spirit, she'd become an advocate in her own right. Using her communication device, she wrote letters to lawmakers about accessibility, shared her story with other children facing challenges, and even spoke at a foundation gala. My name is Emma, her device voiced as she controlled it with her eyes. I am 10 years old. Doctors said I would not do anything, but here I am. I go to school, I have friends, I have the best little brother. I help my daddy with his work. I am disabled, but I am not my disability. I am Emma. The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes. Thomas, now 6, stood on his chair, clapping and shouting, That's my sister! That's my Emma! But perhaps the most profound moment came later that year, when they received a letter that would come full circle in ways they never expected. It's from a doctor in Boston, Sarah said, reading. She says, Oh, James. What? She was pregnant when you spoke at her medical school. Her baby was diagnosed with similar conditions to Emma. She says she was going to terminate, but your speech made her reconsider. Her daughter is 2 now. She's sending a picture. The photo showed a little girl with bright eyes and a bigger smile, clearly facing challenges, but equally clearly loved. Her name is Hope, Sarah read. She named her Hope because that's what your story gave them. James stared at the photo, thinking about ripples in a pond. One decision to stay in a hospital room instead of walking away. one choice to see potential instead of problems, and now, years later, another little girl existed because of it. "We should invite them to visit," Emma spelled out, having been listening to the conversation. "Hope needs friends like me." "You want to be her friend?" James asked. "I want to be her Emma. Show her she can do anything." And she did. The families met, and Emma took her role as mentor seriously, showing Hope all the things she could do, all the ways to adapt, all the reasons to keep trying. Thomas appointed himself Hope's honorary big brother, teaching her the games he and Emma played. "Your family gave us permission to hope," Hope's mother said, watching the children together. "The doctors were so grim, so certain about limitations. But you showed us that life could be different than predicted. Fuller, richer, worth living." "Emma showed us that," James corrected. "We just listened." As Emma entered her teens, new challenges emerged. Adolescence was complicated enough without severe disabilities. Emma became more aware of her differences, more frustrated by her limitations. There were dark days when she spelled out questions that broke her parents' hearts. "Why am I like this? Will I ever be normal? Do you wish I was different?" James and Sarah navigated these conversations with honesty and love. "You're like this because of a genetic lottery that no one controls," James told her during one particularly hard night. "It's not fair. It's not easy. And yes, sometimes I wish things were different, not because I want a different daughter, but because I want an easier life for the daughter I have." "But," Emma's device spoke. "But," James continued, "you've taught me that easy isn't always better, that normal is overrated, that different can be beautiful. I wouldn't trade you for 100 typical daughters, Emma. You're exactly who you're supposed to be. Even when I'm sad. Especially when you're sad. Feeling sad about hard things is normal, it's human. You're allowed to grieve what you can't do. Just don't let it blind you to what you can." Thomas, now 10, added his own perspective. "Emma, you know what's weird? My friends think you're the coolest person ever. They say their sisters are boring, but you're like a superhero with your robot voice and your cool chair. Plus, you help Dad save people. That's way better than normal." Emma's teenage years brought unexpected joys too. She discovered a talent for poetry, using her communication device to create verses that captured her unique perspective on the world. Her poem, "Dancing in My Dreams," won a national contest and was published in a major anthology. She developed her first crush on a boy in her class who also used a communication device. Their conversations were slow but sweet. Two teenagers navigating feelings complicated by bodies that didn't cooperate. "He thinks I'm pretty," Emma shared one day, her eyes bright with excitement. "You are pretty," Sarah said, "inside and out. But my body is yours, and anyone worth caring about will see past its challenges to the amazing person inside." The boy Marcus became Emma's first boyfriend, in whatever way that meant for two severely disabled teenagers. They held hands by resting them near each other. They went to movies where they sat side by side. They had long conversations through their devices about everything from favorite songs to future dreams. "She's growing up," Sarah said one night, watching Emma video chat with Marcus, their devices allowing them to communicate from their respective homes. "She is," James agreed. "Differently than we might have imagined, but growing up all the same." "Are you okay with it? Her dating?" James considered. "I'm okay with her being happy, with her experiencing everything she can. Marcus is a good kid. His parents are dealing with the same worries we are. We'll figure it out together." Emma's 16th birthday was celebrated with a massive party at the newest Emma Grace Center. Hundreds of people came. Families whose lives had been touched by the foundation, doctors who'd learned from their story, friends who'd become family. "Thank you all for coming," Emma's device spoke as she addressed the crowd. 16 years ago, doctors said I would be a burden. Instead, I became a bridge between what people think is possible and what actually is. Thank you to my parents who chose to cross that bridge with me. Thank you to my brother who makes me laugh every day. Thank you to everyone who sees me, not my chair. Here's to 16 more years of proving people wrong. The celebration continued late into the evening, but James found himself stepping outside for a moment of quiet reflection. 16 years since that devastating ultrasound. 16 years of challenges he couldn't have imagined and joys he couldn't have predicted. "You okay?" Sarah found him on the balcony. "Just thinking. About that doctor's appointment. About how terrified I was. And now? Now I'm grateful. Grateful he was wrong about Emma being a burden. Grateful I was too stubborn to listen. Grateful you were strong enough to stand with me." He pulled her close. "Grateful for every single day of these 16 years. "The gratitude goes both ways," Sarah said. "You could have chosen easier. Many men would have." "Many men miss out on extraordinary daughters because they're afraid of different," James replied. "Their loss." They stood together, watching the city lights, listening to the party inside where their daughter was living proof that life's value couldn't be measured in abilities. "Mum, Dad?" Thomas appeared in the doorway. "Emma wants you. She has something to tell you." They found Emma surrounded by friends, her eyes bright with excitement. "Tell them," Marcus's device encouraged. "I got in," Emma announced. "The writing program. I got in." She'd applied to a prestigious online creative writing program for disabled youth, sending her poetry and essays. The acceptance rate was less than 10%. "Emma, that's incredible." Sarah hugged her carefully. "I'm so proud of you." "My teacher says I have a unique voice," Emma continued, "because I see the world differently. My disability is my strength." James knelt beside her chair, overwhelmed with pride. "You're going to change the world with your words, Emma, just like you've changed it with your life." "Already started, Daddy, with your help." As the party continued, James watched his family. Sarah helping Emma interact with guests, Thomas demonstrating Emma's communication system to curious kids, Emma herself glowing with accomplishment and possibility. 16 years ago, he'd been given a choice disguised as advice. Walk away from difficulty or walk through it. He'd chosen to walk through it and discovered that the most difficult paths often led to the most beautiful destinations. Emma would face more challenges. There would be medical crises, accessibility battles, and a world that still too often saw disability before humanity. But she would face them with parents who chose her every day, a brother who championed her, a community that supported her, and most importantly, a spirit that refused to be limited by limitations. "Daddy," Emma called out, "come dance with me." James went to his daughter, taking her hands in his, moving her chair gently to the music while she vocalized along. Around the mothers joined in, some walking, some rolling, some carried, all dancing in their own ways. Dr. Harrison, now a regular volunteer and transformed advocate, watched from the corner with tears in his eyes. He'd been wrong about everything that mattered. Emma hadn't ruined James's life, she'd revealed it. She hadn't been a burden, she'd been a blessing. She hadn't limited their world, she'd expanded it beyond measure. The music played on and Emma smiled, her joy radiating through the room. 16 years of proving that love was stronger than fear, that choice was more powerful than circumstance, that a life deemed not worth living could touch thousands of others. "I love my life," Emma spelled out later that night, exhausted but happy. "Different but beautiful." "Just like you," James said, kissing her forehead, "just exactly like you." As they prepared for bed that night, the house finally quiet, James found the journal he'd started when Sarah was pregnant. He'd written faithfully, documenting their journey. Now he added a new entry. "Dear Emma, today you turned 16. Today you got into the writing program. Today you danced and laughed and showed the world once again that you are not your diagnosis. You are a writer, a sister, a daughter, a friend, an advocate, a teacher. You are Emma Grace Mitchell, and you are exactly who you're supposed to be. Thank you for choosing us as much as we chose you. Thank you for teaching us that perfection isn't about being flawless. It's about being whole. All my love, Dad." He closed the journal, knowing that their story was far from over. Emma would continue to grow, to challenge expectations, to teach everyone around her that disability was just one part of a person, not their defining feature. There would be more battles to fight, more barriers to break, more minds to change. But they would face them together, as they always had. One day, one challenge, one victory at a time. Because 16 years ago, when a doctor urged him to leave, James Mitchell had chosen to stay, and that choice had made all the difference. In the end, Dr. Harrison had been right about one thing. Emma had changed everything, but not in the way he'd predicted. She hadn't destroyed their lives. She'd transformed them. She hadn't been a burden. She'd been a gift. She hadn't limited their future. She'd expanded it beyond anything they could have imagined. And somewhere out there, in cities across the country, other families were making the same choice, choosing love over fear, possibility over prediction, their children over convenience, each one adding their voice to a chorus that said disability didn't diminish worth, that different didn't mean less, that every life had value beyond measure. The Emma Grace Foundation continued to grow, touching lives, changing minds, building a world where every child was seen as a blessing, not a burden, where doctors led with hope, not statistics, where parents were supported, not judged, where children like Emma could thrive, not just survive. It all started with a choice in a doctor's office, with a man who refused to leave, with a woman who refused to give up, with a child who refused to be limited by limitations. It started with love, and with love, it would continue. Because that's what love does. It stays when leaving would be easier. It fights when surrendering would be simpler. It believes when doubt would be logical. It chooses again and again to see the light in the darkness, the ability in the disability, the daughter in the diagnosis. And in choosing love, James and Sarah Mitchell hadn't just saved their daughter's life, they discovered their own. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey of love, choice, and the true meaning of family. If Emma's story touched your heart, if it changed how you think about disability and worth, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Hit that notification bell so you never miss our stories of hope and humanity. And remember, sometimes the most difficult choices lead to the most beautiful destinations. Share in the comments where you're watching from and how this story impacted you. Every life has value, every child deserves to be chosen, and every family has the power to change the world, one choice at a time.